Episode 1. The Fall Before the Rise. Ethan sat at his cluttered desk, staring blankly at the blinking cursor on his computer screen. His inbox was flooded with overdue bills and final notices from creditors. The remnants of his failed business venture were scattered around him. Product prototypes, contracts, and the last few marketing plans he had never had the chance to execute. His heart sank as he scrolled through the emails, each one a reminder of how far he had fallen. A year ago, Ethan had been a man of big dreams. He left his corporate job to start his own business, convinced he could turn his ideas into a multimillion-dollar empire. He'd spent his entire life savings, borrowed from friends, even mortgaged his home to fund his startup. The venture had seemed promising at first. He had even secured a few investors who believed in his vision. But soon enough, everything began to unravel. The market shifted, competitors moved faster, and mistakes Ethan never anticipated began to pile up. Now, he was left with nothing but debt and disappointment. His family avoided him, his friends pitied him, and the last person who believed in him, his girlfriend, Rachel, had left him a few months back. The house felt empty without her, but Ethan couldn't blame her for walking away. He dragged her through his financial disaster, promising again and again that things would turn around. But they never did. As Ethan sat in the dimly lit room, he felt the crushing weight of his failures. How did it all go so wrong? Was it bad luck? Poor decisions? Or was he just not cut out for this? He wished there was someone, anyone, who could show him where he'd gone wrong. A glimmer of hope asterisk. That night, sleep eluded him. Ethan tossed and turned, haunted by the same question that had been plaguing him for months. What now? Unable to sleep, he found himself back at his desk, mindlessly scrolling through emails, desperate for a distraction. That's when he saw it, an email he didn't remember receiving. The subject line read, "I know why you failed, and I can help you succeed." His pulse quickened. He opened the email, half expecting it to be a scam or a piece of junk mail. But the message was surprisingly short and direct. Ethan, I know exactly what you're going through. I've been where you are now, broken, lost, and on the verge of losing everything. But I turned it all around, and now I'm offering to help you do the same. The path to success isn't what you think it is. I can show you the way. Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. at Cafe Rialto. If you're ready to change your life, be there. Victor. Ethan frowned, reading the message again. Victor? He didn't recognize the name. And what kind of email was this? It had no formal signature, no details, just a vague promise of success. Every instinct told him to ignore it. But something about it lingered in his mind, sparking a tiny glimmer of hope. What if this was real? What if this Victor guy really could help him? The rational part of Ethan told him it was probably a scam. No one could magically solve his problems. But then again, what did he have to lose? His life was already in ruins. Worst case scenario, he wasted an afternoon meeting a stranger. Best case? He found something that could help him climb out of this abyss. The decision asterisk. The next morning, Ethan found himself staring at the clock, debating whether to go to the meeting. He felt foolish for even considering it. What kind of successful person would send such a cryptic message to a stranger? The whole thing felt off. But as the minutes ticked closer to 3 p.m., he found himself grabbing his jacket and keys. As he drove to Cafe Rialto, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe Victor was an investor looking for struggling entrepreneurs to mentor. Maybe he was some kind of self-made millionaire who had overcome the same challenges Ethan was facing. The thought made him uneasy. If this was too good to be true, it probably was. He pulled up to the cafe and stepped inside. It was a quaint place, filled with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of conversations. Ethan scanned the room, unsure of what, or who, he was looking for. In the far corner, a man waved him over. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded a quiet confidence. "Ethan?" the man asked, standing as Ethan approached the table. Ethan nodded, and they shook hands. "You must be Victor." Victor smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "I'm glad you decided to come." The conversation asterisk. They sat down, and for a moment there was an awkward silence. Ethan didn't know where to begin. "So why am I here?" he asked finally. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "I know what you're going through, Ethan. I've seen it 100 times. You're smart, driven, but you're stuck. You keep trying to solve the same problem the same way, hoping for a different outcome. And every time, you're left disappointed." Ethan frowned. "And you think you know how to fix that?" "I don't think, Ethan." "I know." There was something about the way Victor spoke, so calm, so assured, that made Ethan believe him, even though he barely knew him. "How?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "What makes you so sure?" Victor smiled. "Because I've been where you are now. I've made the same mistakes, faced the same failures. And then I found the truth. Success isn't about working harder or having the best idea. It's about understanding the game and playing it better than anyone else." Ethan stared at him, unsure of what to say. "And you're willing to share that with me?" Victor nodded. "I am. But there's a catch." "Of course there is," Ethan muttered, sitting back in his chair. Victor's expression turned serious. "This isn't a quick fix or a free handout. If you want what I have, you're going to have to earn it. And once you start down this path, there's no turning back." Ethan hesitated. The weight of Victor's words hung in the air. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. But could he trust this man? Was he really ready for what lay ahead? "I don't have anything to lose," Ethan said finally, meeting Victor's gaze. Victor smiled again, but this time there was something darker in his eyes. "Good. Then we start tomorrow." Episode 2. The Mentor's Secret. The next day, Ethan sat in the same cafe, his mind racing with thoughts of what was about to unfold. He had spent the entire night replaying his conversation with Victor, wondering if he had made the right decision. Part of him still thought this was too good to be true. A random stranger offering the secret to success sounded like a scam. But then again, what choice did he have? His life had reached rock bottom, and any chance of climbing out of this hole was better than none. Victor arrived, just as calm and composed as before. Dressed in a sleek, tailored suit, he looked every bit the part of a successful businessman. He exuded confidence, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that made it clear he knew something Ethan didn't. As they settled into their seats, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. "I'm glad you showed up," Victor said, his voice steady. "Most people don't. They're either too scared or too skeptical to even take the first step." "I almost didn't," Ethan admitted, shrugging. "But like I said, I don't have anything to lose." "That's exactly why you're ready," Victor replied, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that unnerved Ethan. "You see, success comes to those who are willing to risk everything because they know they can't afford not to." Ethan nodded, trying to absorb every word. "So what now? What's the big secret?" Victor paused, letting the silence hang between them for a moment before leaning forward. "The secret isn't what you think it is. It's not about money, not even about having the perfect idea. It's about leverage, understanding how to use the resources you already have, the people around you, and the opportunities that most overlook. The truth is, success isn't about working harder. It's about thinking differently." Ethan frowned. "Leverage? What do you mean?" Victor smiled, as if he was waiting for that question. Look, most people think that to become successful, they need to reinvent the wheel, create something entirely new, or work themselves to the bone. But the truly successful people? They find ways to solve problems that already exist, and they do it in a way no one else has thought of. They don't need to be the smartest or the richest. They just need to be the one who sees the opportunity that others miss. The first challenge asterisk. Ethan stared at Victor, trying to grasp the concept. So how do I do that? How do I find these opportunities? Victor leaned back, crossing his arms. It's not about finding the opportunity. It's about recognizing it when it's in front of you. Let me ask you something. What's a problem that millions of people face every day, but no one has solved in a meaningful way? Ethan blinked. I don't know. There are so many problems in the world. Exactly, Victor said, his voice sharp. That's your first lesson. The world is filled with problems, and where there are problems, there's money to be made. But here's the catch. It's not enough to just know the problem. You have to solve it in a way that's scalable, that millions of people can use, and that no one else is doing. Ethan sat back, trying to process the information. It sounded simple when Victor said it, but in reality, it felt impossible. How was he supposed to find a problem that millions of people had and solve it in a way no one else had? His mind raced through the failures of his past business ventures. Each one had addressed a problem, but none had been scalable, and none had the impact Victor was talking about. Victor seemed to sense his hesitation. You're overthinking it, he said, his tone softer. You're trying to find the answer right now, but that's not how this works. The first step is to change the way you look at the world. Opportunities are everywhere, but most people are too focused on their own limitations to see them. Ethan nodded, but doubt still lingered. Okay, but how do I start? Victor's smile widened. I'm glad you asked. Here's your first challenge. Over the next week, I want you to observe everything around you. Look at the businesses you interact with, the products you use, the services you pay for. Ask yourself, what's missing? What frustrates you about these things? Where's the gap that no one is filling? Ethan raised an eyebrow. That's it? Victor chuckled. That's just the beginning. You'd be surprised how many people never even get this far. Most people don't think to question the status quo. But if you want to be successful, you have to see the world for what it is, a collection of problems waiting to be solved. The weight of the challenge asterisk. The conversation continued, with Victor explaining more about his philosophy of leverage and opportunity. He told Ethan stories of famous entrepreneurs who had built their empires not by inventing something completely new, but by solving problems in a unique way. By the time the meeting ended, Ethan felt overwhelmed but also intrigued. Could it really be that simple? Was success really just about seeing the world differently? As Ethan walked back to his car, his mind buzzed with possibilities. He began to look at everything around him differently. The long lines at the coffee shop, the poorly designed parking meter system, even the way people shuffled through their daily routines, all of it felt like potential. He didn't know what he was looking for yet, but he was starting to see what Victor meant. There were cracks in the world, and maybe, just maybe, he could find one that he could fill. But despite the excitement, there was still a nagging voice in the back of his mind. Victor had been so confident, so certain about everything. But how did he know this would work for Ethan? How did he know that Ethan wouldn't just fail again? The revelation asterisk. The following days were a whirlwind for Ethan. He took Victor's challenge seriously, spending hours observing the world around him, trying to spot opportunities that he had never noticed before. He kept a notebook with him at all times, jotting down ideas as they came to him, problems with products, inefficiencies in services, gaps in the market. The more he looked, the more he saw, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was onto something. But as the week went on, doubt began to creep in. None of the ideas felt big enough. None of them seemed like they could scale in the way Victor had described. Was he missing something? Or was he just not cut out for this? By the time he met Victor again at the end of the week, Ethan was both excited and nervous. He laid out his observations, his ideas, his potential solutions. But as he spoke, he could see Victor's expression change. The confidence that had once filled the room seemed to fade, replaced by something darker, more critical. "You're on the right track," Victor said finally, his voice measured. "But you're still thinking too small. The problems you're seeing, they're real, but they're not the ones that will make you a millionaire. You need to dig deeper. Think bigger." Ethan's heart sank. He had worked so hard, but it wasn't enough. "Then what do I do?" he asked, his frustration clear. Victor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You have to push past the obvious solutions. The real opportunity is hidden beneath the surface, and most people give up before they find it. But if you're willing to keep going, to keep digging, you'll find it." The episode ends with Ethan at a crossroads. He has glimpsed the potential that Victor spoke of, but he is still unsure whether he has what it takes to truly succeed. As Victor's final words echo in his mind, asterisk asterisk, "Once you start down this path, there's no turning back." Asterisk asterisk, Ethan knows that the hardest part is yet to come. Episode 3. The Impossible Choice. It had been 2 weeks since Ethan's last meeting with Victor, and the pressure was mounting. Victor's cryptic advice about thinking bigger, about finding hidden opportunities that could scale, played on a loop in Ethan's mind. He had notebooks filled with ideas, observations, and problems he had noticed in his daily life. But none of them felt significant enough. None of them seemed like the million-dollar idea Victor had been pushing him to find. Ethan was back in his apartment, which now looked more like a war room than a living space. Papers, diagrams, and notes were scattered everywhere. The bright post-it notes plastered across the walls were reminders of his failures, half-baked ideas that seemed brilliant in the moment but had fizzled out under scrutiny. His phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from his old friend, Matt. Ethan stared at it for a moment before picking it up. Asterisk, "Hey man, haven't heard from you in a while. You okay? Want to grab a drink?" Asterisk. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't seen Matt in months, not since his financial collapse. The truth was, he had been avoiding most of his friends. They meant well, but their lives were moving forward while his was stuck in limbo. They didn't understand the pressure he was under, or the obsession that was consuming him. He thought about responding, but then tossed his phone aside. Now wasn't the time. He couldn't afford distractions, not when he was this close, or at least, he hoped he was close. But the clock was ticking. His bank account was dwindling fast, and he couldn't hold off the creditors forever. If he didn't find something soon, he'd be completely broke. The breaking point asterisk. A few days later, Ethan found himself at a coffee shop, sipping his drink and watching the people around him. He had become almost paranoid, constantly scanning for problems, inefficiencies, gaps in the market, just as Victor had taught him. But nothing seemed to click. Every time he thought he had found something, he would research it online and discover a dozen competitors who were already addressing the issue. Or worse, he'd realize there wasn't enough demand to make his idea scalable. Frustration bubbled up inside him, and he clenched his fists. Was this all just a waste of time? Had Victor set him up to fail? In a moment of desperation, Ethan grabbed his phone and called Victor. "Victor, I need to talk," Ethan said as soon as Victor answered. "I'm losing my mind over here. I've been doing everything you said, but nothing feels right. Every idea I come up with is either too small or someone else is already doing it. What am I missing?" There was a pause on the other end, and for a moment, Ethan feared Victor wouldn't respond. But then he heard the calm, composed voice that had become so familiar. "You're not missing anything, Ethan," Victor said. "You're just at the point where most people quit. They get frustrated because they don't see results right away, and they give up. But you have to keep going. The breakthrough doesn't come when you expect it. It comes when you're willing to push through the frustration and doubt." Ethan let out a long breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. "But what if I don't find it? What if I fail again?" "You're only going to fail if you stop," Victor said. "Keep your eyes open. The answer is right in front of you, but you have to be willing to see it." A spark of hope asterisk. The call with Victor gave Ethan a brief surge of energy, but as the days wore on, that energy faded. He was spiraling, and he knew it. The pressure was suffocating, and the weight of his past failures loomed over him like a storm cloud. Then, one evening, something clicked. It wasn't a grand, earth-shattering moment, but rather a simple realization. Ethan was sitting at his kitchen table, absent-mindedly browsing through his social media feed, when he noticed a trend. People were frustrated, complaining about an everyday issue that affected millions, something so common that most had just accepted it as part of life. Ethan leaned forward, his heart racing. He had seen this problem before, but he had never thought of it as an opportunity. It was so ingrained in the way people lived their lives that no one bothered to question it. But now, with Victor's words echoing in his mind, Ethan saw it for what it was, a gap, a crack in the system that could be exploited. He grabbed his notebook and started jotting down ideas, brainstorming solutions. The more he wrote, the more excited he became. This was it. This was the problem that could scale, the one that millions of people dealt with daily, but no one had effectively solved. But then the doubts crept back in. What if he was wrong? What if there was a reason no one had tackled this issue before? What if he was just setting himself up for another failure? The impossible choice asterisk. By the end of the week, Ethan had fleshed out his idea. It was risky, yes, but it had potential. He could see the path forward, how to develop the product, how to market it, how to scale it. But it would require everything he had left, his time, his energy, and most importantly, his last bit of money. He knew he couldn't do it alone. He'd need to hire developers, marketers, and product designers to bring the idea to life. But the problem was, Ethan was broke. He had just enough money left to either launch this idea or pay off some of his debts and try to stabilize his life. If he chose the former, there was no safety net. If this failed, he would lose everything. Ethan spent days agonizing over the decision. He consulted with friends, but none of them understood the gravity of the situation. They advised him to play it safe, to find a steady job, to rebuild slowly. But every time Ethan thought about walking away from his idea, he felt a pit in his stomach. He called Victor again, desperate for guidance. "I'm at a crossroads," Ethan said, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "If I go all in on this, I could lose everything. But if I don't, I feel like I'm giving up on my last shot at success." Victor was quiet for a moment before responding. "The choice is yours, Ethan. No one can make it for you. But I will tell you this, great success never comes without great risk. You know what's at stake, and you know what could happen if you fail. But you also know that playing it safe won't get you where you want to go." Ethan felt the weight of Victor's words sink in. This was it. The moment he had been dreading and anticipating all at once. He could either walk away and try to rebuild his life slowly, or he could risk everything for the chance at something greater. That night, Ethan made his decision. He was going all in. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. The episode ends with Ethan sitting at his desk, staring at the screen as he finalizes the last pieces of his plan. His heart pounds in his chest as he clicks send on an email to a potential investor, outlining his vision and asking for a meeting. He knows that from this moment on, there is no turning back. The screen fades to black as the weight of his decision hangs in the air. Episode 4. The Rise and the Revelation. Ethan sat in the office of a venture capitalist, anxiously awaiting the outcome of his pitch. He had spent the past 2 weeks preparing for this moment, fine-tuning every detail of his business proposal, building mock-ups, and anticipating every question the investors might ask. His nerves were frayed, but his determination was unwavering. He had risked everything on this idea, and now the time had come to find out if it would pay off. Across the table, the investor, Lisa Connors, was flipping through his proposal. She was a hard-nosed businesswoman with a reputation for spotting winning ideas, but also for cutting them down mercilessly when they didn't live up to her standards. Finally, she looked up and met Ethan's gaze. "Your idea has potential," she said, her tone neutral. "But there's a lot of risk involved. I like that you've identified a real problem, something millions of people experience, but the solution isn't fully developed yet. You're going to need a lot of capital and expertise to get this off the ground." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. "I know there's risk, but I believe in this. I've done my research, and I'm confident this is a scalable solution. I just need the resources to make it happen." Lisa studied him for a moment, her sharp eyes taking in his determination. "I'm willing to invest," she said finally, "but I want 30% of your company in return." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. 30% was more than he had anticipated giving up. It was a steep price, but without her backing, his idea would never get off the ground. He swallowed his nerves. Deal. The beginning of success asterisk. With Lisa's investment secured, Ethan's life changed almost overnight. He now had the capital to bring his idea to life. He assembled a small but talented team of developers, designers, and marketers, all of whom shared his passion for the project. The product, an app designed to solve the problem he had identified, began to take shape. The early days were grueling. Ethan and his team worked around the clock, fine-tuning every aspect of the app, testing it with focus groups, and making adjustments based on feedback. There were moments of doubt, moments when things didn't work the way they had hoped, but Ethan refused to give up. This was his chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers. Months passed, and finally, the day arrived. The app was ready to launch. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the screen as the launch countdown ticked closer to 0. His heart was racing. This was it. Everything he had worked for, everything he had risked, came down to this moment. 3, 2, 1. The timer hit 0, and the app went live. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, downloads started trickling in. Ethan watched as the numbers grew, from dozens to hundreds, then thousands. By the end of the first week, the app had gone viral. People were sharing it on social media, influencers were talking about it, and the reviews were overwhelmingly positive. It was solving a problem millions of people faced every day, just as Ethan had envisioned. Success had arrived. The highs and lows of success asterisk. With the app's success, Ethan's life transformed. The business grew rapidly, attracting more users and additional investors. His company expanded, and soon he was hiring more employees, opening new offices, and building a brand that was becoming a household name. Ethan found himself in meetings with high-profile investors, speaking at tech conferences, and rubbing shoulders with some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the industry. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was finally where he was meant to be. The sense of accomplishment, the validation of all his hard work and sacrifices, was intoxicating. But as his business grew, so did the pressures. Ethan found himself working long hours, sometimes 7 days a week, just to keep up with the demands of running a rapidly scaling company. His personal life, which had been neglected during the app's development, suffered even more now. Friends and family rarely saw him, and when they did, Ethan was often distracted, thinking about the next big business decision. The pressure to maintain and grow the company weighed heavily on him. Investors were expecting more growth, employees were relying on him, and the public was watching his every move. Success, Ethan realized, was not as simple as he had imagined. It came with responsibilities he hadn't anticipated. Victor reappears asterisk. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his office, reviewing financial reports, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Victor. Asterisk, we need to talk. Meet me at Cafe Rialto tomorrow. 3 p.m. Asterisk. Ethan hadn't heard from Victor in months, not since the day he made the choice to risk everything on his app. He had almost forgotten about Victor, lost in the whirlwind of his success. But now, with the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him, the timing of Victor's message seemed uncanny. The next day, Ethan arrived at the cafe. Victor was already there, sitting at the same table where they had met months earlier. He looked exactly the same, calm, composed, and enigmatic. "Congratulations," Victor said as Ethan sat down. "You've done it. You've built something successful." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this meeting than a simple congratulations. "But there's something you need to understand now," Victor continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Success isn't just about wealth or achievement. It comes with a cost." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Victor leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "You've built something great, but now you're responsible for it. The weight of that responsibility can crush you if you're not careful. I've seen it happen before. People achieve success, but they lose themselves in the process. Their relationships fall apart, their health deteriorates, and they forget why they started in the first place." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had already felt some of what Victor was describing: the long hours, the strained personal life, the constant pressure to keep growing. But he had always thought that was just part of the deal. Was there another way? Victor's voice softened. "The question you need to ask yourself now is, how much are you willing to sacrifice for success? Because the path you're on, it doesn't end here. The more you succeed, the higher the stakes become. Are you ready for that?" Ethan stared at Victor, his mind racing. He had worked so hard to get here, but now he was beginning to realize that success came with a different kind of burden. Was he prepared to handle it? Cliffhanger ending asterisk. The episode ends with Ethan walking out of the cafe, Victor's words echoing in his mind. The thrill of success had begun to fade, replaced by the cold reality of what was at stake. As he stepped into the bustling city streets, Ethan knew that his journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Episode 5. The Price of Fortune. Ethan sat in the corner office of his new headquarters, staring out at the skyline. The view was spectacular: towering buildings, bustling streets, and a city full of life. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. His app had become a massive success, transforming not just his finances but his entire life. His company was growing faster than he had ever imagined, and his name was now synonymous with innovation and success. But inside, Ethan felt a gnawing sense of unease. Victor's words from their last meeting echoed in his mind, asterisk. How much are you willing to sacrifice for success? Asterisk. He hadn't fully understood the weight of that question at the time, but now, as he sat alone in his office, he felt the full force of it. The more successful he became, the more isolated he felt. His relationships had crumbled, his health was deteriorating, and every day brought a new set of challenges and pressures. The thrill of building something great had long faded, replaced by the constant fear of losing it all. Ethan rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar throb of a headache creeping in. He hadn't slept more than a few hours a night in weeks, and the stress was beginning to take its toll. But there was no time to rest, not when the entire company depended on him. His assistant knocked on the door, pulling him out of his thoughts. "Ethan, the investors are waiting for you in the conference room. They're expecting an update on the new product." Ethan nodded, standing up and adjusting his suit. He put on his game face, the one he had perfected over the past year. To the outside world, he was calm, collected, and in control. But inside, he felt like he was walking on a tightrope, one wrong move away from disaster. The investor meeting asterisk. The meeting with the investors was tense. They were excited about the company's growth, but concerned about the long-term sustainability of the business model. They wanted more expansion, more innovation, more results, and they wanted them fast. "We're seeing great returns, Ethan," said Lisa Connors, one of the original investors who had believed in his app. "But the market is changing. You need to move faster if you want to stay ahead of the competition. We need new features, new partnerships. What's your plan for scaling further?" Ethan listened to their demands, feeling the familiar pressure tightening around him. He had already pushed his team to the limit, and the rapid growth was beginning to strain the company's resources. But these investors had put their money and faith in him, and they wanted results. "I understand," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "We're working on several new initiatives that will expand our market share and increase profitability. I'll have a more detailed plan for you next week." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Next week? That's cutting it close. We need to see concrete progress, Ethan. Don't forget, we're in this for the long haul, but we need to know you're keeping up with the pace." Ethan nodded, but inside, he felt a wave of anxiety. Keeping up the pace? He was already working himself to the bone. How much faster could they move without burning out? The personal cost asterisk. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse apartment. The place was luxurious, filled with all the trappings of wealth, expensive furniture, high-tech gadgets, and a breathtaking view of the city. But it felt empty. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. He hadn't spoken to his family in months, not since the business had really taken off. His father had always been supportive, but Ethan had stopped calling when he realized he had no time to visit. His sister had tried reaching out, but each time she called, Ethan was either in a meeting or too tired to talk. Even his old friends had stopped trying to make plans with him. They had their own lives, and Ethan had become a distant figure in theirs. Then there was Rachel, his ex-girlfriend. They hadn't spoken since she had left him before the business took off. He had been too obsessed with his work to give her the time and attention she deserved, and eventually, she had grown tired of waiting for him to come back. She had moved on, and Ethan had convinced himself that he didn't need anyone, that success was all that mattered. But now, as he sat in his empty apartment, he couldn't help but wonder if he had been wrong. The phone rang, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Victor. The final conversation with Victor asterisk. Ethan answered, trying to mask the exhaustion in his voice. "Victor, what's up?" "I've been keeping an eye on you, Ethan," Victor said, his voice calm but with an edge of something else, concern maybe. "You've done well. You built something extraordinary. But I can tell you're starting to feel the weight of it." Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "You were right," he admitted. "Success isn't what I thought it would be. It's harder. It always is," Victor replied. "That's the part they don't tell you. People think success is all about wealth, fame, and power. But the truth is, it comes with a price. The more you achieve, the more you have to give up." Ethan sighed, feeling the truth of Victor's words. "I've already given up so much. My relationships, my health. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it." Victor paused for a moment before responding. That's the question you need to ask yourself. You've reached the top, but what did you leave behind to get there? And what are you willing to leave behind to stay there? Ethan felt a lump forming in his throat. He had worked so hard to achieve this level of success, but now, as he stood at the pinnacle, he couldn't help but feel like something was missing. What do I do now? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That's up to you, Victor said. But remember this, success doesn't define who you are. It's a part of your life, but it's not everything. You need to find balance, or you'll lose yourself in the process. The choice asterisk. Over the next few days, Victor's words weighed heavily on Ethan. He attended meetings, worked on new projects, and pushed his team harder than ever, but there was a growing emptiness inside him. He had built an empire, but it had cost him more than he was willing to admit. Finally, one night, Ethan made a decision. He called a meeting with his board of directors and announced that he was stepping down as CEO. The room fell silent, and for a moment, no one knew what to say. I built this company from the ground up, and I'm proud of what we've achieved, Ethan said, his voice steady. But I need to take a step back. I need to find balance in my life, and I can't do that while running the company. I'm trusting you to take it forward. The board members were shocked, but Ethan felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe again. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. The episode ends with Ethan walking out of the boardroom, leaving behind the empire he had built. He steps into the elevator, feeling a mix of fear and freedom. As the elevator doors close, Ethan takes a deep breath, unsure of what comes next, but ready to find out.